Hey, you're more powerful family. We're all spiritual beings having a human experience here to fulfill a soul purpose. And you know that because you're going through You're More Powerful Than You Think in the Healed Steps. And I'm really excited. One of the reasons we do this interview is I want to bring people from around the world that live and believe like we do. And they know they've been through the trials of their humanity. They've made it through the challenge. They found their soul purpose. And now they're contributing to others, making humanity in this world a better place. And there's no time in the world history other than now. By the way, we're all here, so we picked this time to be here to make a difference, to raise people up and have, I said this prayer a million times in Catholic Church, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And that's why we're here. And I'm really excited to bring these two amazing women that I've recently met. One, Deborah Drummond, that we got on the phone there on Messenger, and we're like, how did we meet? I don't know. Did you email me? What did I didn't email you. What are you talking about? So we finally had to give that up and realize that it's probably a God thing, and there's a reason we come together. And after being introduced to you and seeing your knowledge on quantum physics and metaphysical principles and entrepreneurship and hearing your story, then it's like, oh my God, we need to talk to you. And then I get the pleasure of meeting your partner, Caroline, over here, who just briefly told me her story, who has an amazing story, like we all do, challenging through our humanity, saying, that's enough, I'm done. We're going to create a breakthrough, creating a new life, and now again, contributing to people around the world. So with your podcast, True That, and I would love to hear your story and about the things that you're doing. So welcome, Caroline and Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This is a pleasure.
Yeah, sure thing. So who wants to go first?
Well,
Caroline,
Deborah likes to go. Deborah likes to go
see,
first.
this is why we do so well together.
She likes to be the star of the show, so I'm used to that. I'm gonna let her go first, and
There
then
you
she
go.
likes to have the last word at the end as well.
So just so you know, when we're on our podcast, we're known for what Caroline calls throwing the pot at each other. So we do love each other. So we'll just put that out there right away. We've had some great experiences together. So I get to go first. Well, let me share with you how I got to hang out with this crazy woman. So when you talk about having those epiphanies and contributing, I think the word contribution is a big aspect of what me and Caroline do. And we've recently, through our years of knowing each other, made a shift this year, like the world commanded, right? Let's face it, it was the time to make a shift. Now, me and Caroline have been in a business together, and I'll let her talk a bit about that, for a number of years. And that started with a gorgeous, beautiful, funky, interesting, strange, do it over again, never do it again marketing tour that we met on in Australia, where we did 11 flights and 13 hotels. And like Carolyn says, because we were bunked up together, you either come out never talking to each other again, or you come out like best friends. And we came out like allies because there was 6 women. And if you ever traveled with 6 women, good on you. I'm going to buy you that next glass of champagne. So we came out as allies. But when we talk about the podcast, I mean, there's lots of stories that I can say where I really did a major shift and I contributed. I mean, probably the biggest one that I talk about a lot is when people say, how did you get into the world of metaphysics? Like you talk about, when I came from a world of nightclubs, nightclub management, cocktail waitressing, loving music. I'm totally a music addict. And the epiphany that I had one day after loving that, I mean, isn't that funny when you love something? Like I loved music. I loved who I worked with. Like we were a family. We were tight. When you live nocturnally, you become really tight because no one else is having breakfast at 3 a.m. when you finish work. And, thank God 24-hour restaurants existed. But one day we all went out after work. One day we're hanging with the band, and one day I came home at 5 a.m. and one day it didn't feel right anymore. And that was a very difficult kind of epiphany. It really was. I was sharing this not too long ago. I literally was looking in the mirror in the bathroom at 5 a.m. and the mirror went black. I don't share the story very often. I don't know why I'm sharing it today. Someone needs to hear it, but I'm not kidding. The mirror went black. I could not see myself. Wow. And I had a panic like no other. Like people are like, oh, I've had a panic attack. I'm like, yeah, when you look in the mirror and you can't see yourself, like I was literally touching the mirror and it went black. And then all of a sudden I saw myself and I could hear, and it wasn't like I was really tuned in at that time, you know, I could hear it's like, it's over. And for some reason I woke up the next day and I called my boss. Now I was making incredible money in that industry. It was the 80s, by the way. I am a little older. Caroline usually will talk about my age, but I am a little older, and it was the 80s and money was a plenty in our city. Expo was happening. There was so much money that in my industry that my boss came to me and said, you have not cashed a paycheck in 6 months, because I was making that much money in tips. I lived in a house with a dance floor. That's how much money there is. And one day it was all over due to this mirror experience. And I woke up next day and I called and I quit. And he's like, are you sick? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm done. I'm done. And that took me into the world of metaphysics. I started to
cut you off first for a sec.
Yeah.
First of all, to be able to see a black mirror would blow most people's minds. Okay, that's one thing. Like, holy crap, that's the thing. And then the amount of faith and conviction it takes to be able to make a decision that fast. Like, what was it in your body that you felt that here you are with this great life, doing what you're passionate about, and boom, you're done? I mean, other than the fact you saw a black mirror, but a lot of people wouldn't move still. Why'd you move?
I think what it is was because my perception of what I thought that black mirror meant, because I was living that life. It wasn't a healthy life. It was a financial abundant life. It was a fun life, but I knew in my gut, I'm like, I'm looking at this environment, and you know, that environment can be fun, but it can be really damaging. And I think I was going over this way. It was like, it wasn't going well. Like, you know, when they talk about the 5 people you hang out with the most, like, you know, you should aspire to be them. It was getting funky, and that light can get on you, and it was getting a little dark. And I think,
so that's like, you know, the movie Thelma and Louise? At
yes.
the very end, they're partying, going over the convertible, headed for a 100-foot cliff, right? So you're partying in the convertible, and you got a vision of the cliff.
Yes, and I felt like it was very symbolic, and it was so scary. I'm not going to tell you, it wasn't like an elation. It like scared me to my core. It's like, this is where you're headed, and you better get your together, and you better get it now. And I will take your compliment of faith, because that's exactly what it is. I didn't know. So I was living at that point with my girlfriend, who was the bartender and the cocktail waitress. I mean, this was our life. And they're like, what do you mean you're done? Like, what do you mean you're done? And some people didn't take it well. They're like, oh, look at you. You think you're all that. You think you're, you know, you think you're better than us. You're going to move on. You're going to quit. It wasn't a fun process. It wasn't a fun process, but it was almost like I'd been hit over the head, and I had to go to the hospital and recover. Like I felt like I was out of options. And you're right, I didn't know where it was going to go. I just know that if I kept going that way, it wasn't going to be pretty. So, So
what happened then? So there's the big epiphany, I guess, if you want to call it.
Yeah, that was the epiphany that took me into holistics. And what happened is I decided to take time off, and I decided to retreat from that world. And I actually contacted my ex-fiance and said, I need a place to go. I need a place to chill. I need a place to be kind of safe and chill out. And he's like, yeah. So we used to live together, and he's like, yeah, come back. And so I went back, and I just stayed, and I kind of mentally recovered. And you know what? I slept for a long time. Like I kind of slept for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I started to kind of wake up out of that and go, okay, what do I want to do with my life? And a book fell in my life, a book. It was Living the Light by Shakti Gaiwan. And it talked about a whole other world that I didn't even know about. And that started my personal journey. And then my mother invited me to, now, I mean, I got to say, as much as I love my mother and my family, it was, you know, it was a dysfunctional, functional situation. And she said, I heard this guy, John Bradshaw, is coming to town, and I think that we should go. And it was Healing the Shame That Binds You. He was marketing that. And so I started to hear of these speakers and these authors that wrote a book, and I started to relate enough that I thought, I think maybe I need therapy. I think I should go do some therapy and clean up my dysfunctional, functional family. And then I started to get into doing that. And I started to get into groups, and I started to get into therapy. And then I kind of had this glimpse that maybe I could have a different life and create a different life. And that strength was strong enough just to keep me going down that road. And then I started to, so I kind of tried, I healed myself, and then I decided I wanted to heal others. And that modality that I wanted to do that with was massage, which is where I had the healing studio. And through that massage, finding out that natural ingredients and natural products were the way to go. And then discovering this company that me and Caroline met in that distributes all these natural products, and then wanted to align with her. And so we rocked that company out together. And then this year, the world shifted and we wanted to share that in a different way. And the epiphany of the podcast came to be.
Nice. Well, let me go back to what you said earlier, where I think I need some therapy. I used to tell that to my son when he was a teenager. By the way, you're going to need therapy for this, because I'm going to have to kick your ass right now. So start getting a second job now, because you're going to need this by the time you're 30. But so, yeah, you see the evolution, and so many times, again, and Caroline, you had a shift too that you can tell about in a second, where we hit that moment. Mine was watching my wife take her last breath when she died of cancer. It was like, after I'd healed from that, then it was boom. And that's why You Are More Powerful is here today. So there's so dramatic, and yet I think everybody has those moments.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what are you going to do with those moments?
Yes.
It's not whether or not you have them. And then the problem is, if you don't do anything the first time, like, you were lucky, because then you're going to get, every moment gets worse. Like, the universe is taking, your spirit's taking you one way, man. And if you don't listen to the whispers, all of a sudden you're going to hear yells and screams. Yeah. And then a 2x4.
Well, and I think the mirror was the 2x4. I'm not going to say that I didn't get indication before that. There was indication, and it showed up sometimes in relationships. It showed up in things that came back to me. It showed up in powerlessness. I was very powerless. I felt very powerless over certain things in my life. I couldn't set a boundary. Like, I just couldn't set boundaries. I didn't know I didn't know where I stopped and someone else started. And for the most part, I was happy and joyous, and my personality wasn't any different. I'm still social and I love to help people, but there was the nagging inside, or the dysfunction started to show up on the outside. And I was like, this isn't good. So I think that was kind of one of the final straws. I'm not sure where God would have taken me after that. It would not have been pretty. Yeah,
that might have been off the cliff. Well, cool. Well, let's get your story, Caroline, and then we'll come back and then you can both tell us about your podcast and your purpose of the podcast, why you do it, and how we can get people on that. So, well, Caroline, tell us your story.
I should have clearly gone first, because she's hard to follow. No, it's funny. I'm listening to that, and Deb and I are polar opposite, and at the same time, we've had such a similar story, but we lived it differently. So she had her 2x4 when she was younger. I had a few warnings. I laugh, and for me, it was kind of my tagline that I'm a cat, and I actually am a tiger in my Chinese sign. But I'm probably in my 9th life right now. So I did have quite a few warnings, and I kind of ignored them until I hit 38. That was my 2x4. So I've always lived a life full of adventures, and, living in the moment and going after cool experiences, and not thinking too much, or not being scared about the future. There's one thing that I always trusted for some reason, because I grew up poor, so I should have been kind of scared of missing money and stuff like that. But I grew up differently, that money would always be there. And I would just always have some. And I went through that, and I had my bar years as well, way after Deb was done hers. But,
there it is.
Yeah, there it is. I had to throw it in there. But when I was 24, I got 23, actually, I got pregnant. It was not planned, but it was the most beautiful gift ever, because when I was 16, the doctors told me I could not have kids. So when I got pregnant at 23, for me, it was like a miracle had fallen into earth. And even though I was not with the dad, barely knew him, for me, I was the most joyous. Go ahead.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Because as a woman and 16 years old, when you're told you can never have kids, I would imagine that would be like, well, what do I have to lose? Now I am going to be adventurous. Now I don't have to take care of my body. That was like being raised in Catholicism. It's like, well, there's nothing you can do. You be a sinner. So I figure, well, if I'm a sinner, I might as well sin. But then you realize there's a shitload of pain. But I mean, did you feel that? Like, well, why should I take care of myself? Or, why don't I just, did that one line affect how you lived your life?
Maybe I would say that there was, getting a bit more serious, there was events when I was young of abuse that gave me that feeling already that, why take care of myself? But yes, eventually as a woman, you grow up and you're like, well, I'll have a family one day. And then my sister had 5 kids, not 1, not 2, like everyone in my family had 5 kids, 3 kids, 2 kids. And me, I was always like, I'm not going to have any kids. So I think that you're right on that with hindsight, that I was just like, well, I'm always going to be the party girl and the cool one, and I'm going to be the coolest aunt, and that's going to be my title, So I have a very special relationship with my nephews. It's almost like we're friends, like the older ones. So yes, when I got pregnant, I was just like, oh my goodness. And I clearly remember I found out at midnight because I was at a party and beer that night was not going down. And one of my friends said, well, maybe you're pregnant. And for some reason, that night it made sense. And I went to buy a test.
Wow.
Even though I was convinced that, I couldn't have kids.
Well, what's significant about that, sorry for interrupting, but this is how we go through our humanity. Somebody will tell us something, their belief system, and we take on someone else's belief systems and then begin to limit our lives.
Yeah. And that night at midnight, I called my whole family one by one. And I was just like, hey, I'm pregnant. And they were like, who's the father?
Like, that doesn't matter.
I know. I was not, my only concern was that I was pregnant. And I was, so happy. And for me, it was the beginning of something huge. And I actually, ended up marrying the father. So it turned out okay. But long story short, for me, that was a huge epiphany moment of like, that's when I stopped all the sins, the things that you should not take. So I was taking only the things that were socially acceptable, but all the other things I would not anymore. But like I was smoking cigarette, I completely stopped cold turkey, like everything. I became a new person. I felt like I was born and I became a mother. I had a purpose.
Your identity changed.
Yeah, exactly. And then I kept going, and now I have 3 kids. So clearly I can have kids. Then after, my whole minding has always been like, doing everything as best as I can to give the best life possible to my kids, to never say no to them. We can't have that. We can't do that. Now, there's some pros and cons to that. That's a whole other discussion, but that was the way that I raised them. They're amazing. They're spoiled, but they're amazing. And yeah, I guess my 2x4 really came when I was, before my 2x4, I was working for corporate companies, and I had big positions and it was going very well. But I went through a phase that I was a single mom in there, and corporates, when you're with super big positions, sometimes will treat you very differently if you're a mother, and so that I was a rebel, and I fought a lot against certain systems. So I changed, and eventually I was sick of it. I said, I'm going into nonprofit because clearly there's no egos there and blah, blah. So I started with a nonprofit that was a very rare cancer in Canada. And we started it at 0 and we built it to millions.
Wow, nice.
And then when we built it to millions, I can tell you that when it hit 1 million in the bank account, egos came in and politics started. And then I realized I was getting sick of it, because I realized, when there's money, there's always egos and politics, and sometimes you lose the real causes
When you're not with the right people.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Money's not related, but when you're with the wrong people.
Absolutely. Well, you're right on that.
Yeah.
So that was creating a lot of stress and things like that. And the one thing that I always kept doing that was socially acceptable was drinking, because, you know, having a glass of wine at night is perfectly acceptable. But I think that I got lost in that. And, you know, with the stress, the job, I had my third one. I was heartbroken because I had to put her in daycare. All of this eventually exploded, and my 2x4 was a major burnout. So I had to reevaluate everything, and I decided to completely change where my life was going and start my own business, because I was just like, I'm gonna do it the way that I want to do it. And I actually joined, you know, I started in the network marketing industry, which for me was a savior, because you know, everyone can have their own opinion about this industry, but the one big thing that this industry has that no other industry promotes is self-development. You can't grow in that industry if you don't grow yourself. So if you want to end up being successful, you need to grow yourself, because you will never be able to grow a business bigger than you are.
Well,
Which,
that's exactly
you know,
true.
in corporate and everything, if you want to take one class, you need to have like 14 different managers signing on it. You know, development is not as promoted, and I wish it was, because everyone needs it. But for me, that's what saved me, and that's where I met Blondie.
Nice.
Ooh, Blondie. I'm Blondie.
Well, I want to say there's so many principles of it. Shows exactly why God brought us together, because all these principles are exactly aligned with what we're doing here. You know, I mean, I coach a lot of chiropractors, but I brought in all the spiritual and self-empowerment stuff, because you can only be as successful in business as you are as a person. And you can only move along your soul purpose as far as your consciousness evolves. You know, the more things we want to do, we have to evolve our consciousness, right? And so the other thing that stood out for me was you said, hey, I want to do it my way. So you left the corporation. You know, and it's so fascinating that we come into this world, you know, with these core personality traits, but in reality, you always wanted to do it your way. That was you through a child, right? So it's like the core of who we are never changes. It just depends what we do and the belief systems that we carry with us that may either cover that up. So in spite of everything you went through, your bottom innate characteristics was your independence, your personal strength, and to be able to create the life that you wanted to create, be who you wanted to be in the end. Well, and really, this is almost the beginning. So that's so awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now you guys come together, and now you're doing this Truth Tellers podcast. So tell us why you chose this, and what you do exactly. Excuse me. Tell us about the podcast, and then how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah. Well, you know why I love this, why I love doing interviews, is that, I mean, when you get to know somebody, you don't get to know all the little stories, you know? And so even listening to Caroline talk, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes more sense. That makes more sense. It makes more sense. And you get to hear the little pieces to the little pieces. So it's great. It's like I get to learn about her all over again. Yeah, I think it's pretty easy from me listening to her story, if I was kind of an outsider and myself having my own experience, why we would be so big-hearted about people that are brave enough to make change. And I think that's the word for me, if I was looking at the true that. Caroline's really strong on the truth, the story underneath the story, what made that happen for you. And I think for me, I love the bravery, like that moment, like you said, where I saw the mirror and then I made that change. And I think when you add those two together, because when you choose to become a lifepreneur, which means those people that live like entrepreneurs, like they're hungry, they make change. That's scary. Like, I mean, I got like, you know, pinned out just because I wanted to stop working at the bar, right? So people, whether we let it penetrate or not, there's people's opinions, and you kind of have to solopreneur it in here, right? Like you got to be your own coach. I was just watching Creed the other night and bawling my eyes out. That movie can make me cry like no other, and feel like, why? It's a boxing movie. I love boxing. But the point is, when, you know, you're standing in front of that mirror, like you're fighting you know? And so I think for me, that's my thing. I love supporting people that are their own hero. And when you become an entrepreneur, you better learn how to be your own coach pretty quick, right? Because you can't have someone with you 24/7. I think we create a platform, and I'll just say from my side, and then Caroline definitely share from hers. I think the platform that we create is that people get to draw strength listening to these entrepreneurs. And so I don't care. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. And I had a call this week that blew my mind with someone that's been in my industry 20 years more than me. So I don't care where you're at. There's always people that have done it, you know, have been in it longer. And so I'm a huge believer in coach, counseling, therapies, podcasts, books, speakers. I mean, suck it up, people, because you're going to need it. That's what I think. And so for me, it's about a platform where people can come and hear about people being brave, which allows them to be brave in whatever area of their life, whether they're an entrepreneur or not. So that's kind of my hit on it. Caroline, do you want to take it from here, girl? Brownie?
Yes.
I love that.
Brownie doesn't sound as good.
Well, brownies are, yeah.
I remember the Creed thing. I have to tell a little anecdote on that. When I met her in Vancouver, not in Vancouver, she's from Vancouver, in Australia. So I knew her by reputation. Before I got there, I was quite intimidated I was going to meet Deb Drummond. And she's like this gorgeous blonde, petite, all delicate, eats natural, organic, this, that, spiritual and everything. And then
so basically she's like, perfect in your mind.
Yeah. But you know what? Yes, she is on the outside. And not joking. But I mean, the image that I had. And then she's like, we're going to watch a movie that inspires me. It's Creed. And I was just like, what? Like the boxing movie? She's like, yeah, I watch that over and over. And she's just sitting there like, so anyway, that was pretty interesting. You know, don't judge a book by their cover. She's quite tough. But going back to the podcast, you know, my purpose, and Deb said it very well, but for me, when I started reading, that was amazing personal development. But I opened my mind even more now to listening to, and Deb is a person that actually taught me that quite a bit, because she talks to everyone. And I remember doing trade shows with her, and she would talk to some people, and I was just like, ooh, like all judging in my mind, like, why is she talking to this person? Because, you know, they look weird or too whatever. And then she would come back with the most amazing insights. And I was just like, this person told you that? And she was like, yeah. So she really opened the doors to, even if I thought I was not judgmental, I am, because it's all the blockage that I have since I'm little about, you know, if someone has tattoos, it's this, if this, it's this, it's this. So I started listening to podcasts from anyone and everyone, not only the big names that we know. And I've learned so much, and I really, you know, embrace now that everyone has a different perspective, and we need to learn from all of these different perspectives. And the thing that I say since my kids are born is that they are my biggest teachers, and they actually are. Even my 12-year-old, like, she comes home teaching me stuff about politics or whatever, and I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know before she said it, you know. But when you really open your mind to the fact that you don't know much and you have everything to learn, and that's really what we want to put on our podcast. And you know, I also learned from a story that happened in my life 9 years ago, when I finally became vulnerable and stopped wearing the mask that I grew up with, and I shared my story, how everyone opened up and they were like, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I thought that I had no story. You know, I thought that I was just like a nobody, like you're just one of the other people. But there's always someone that needs to hear your story. And I love how I saw that this week, Les Brown said, you need to tell your story, because eventually that's going to be someone's survival guide. And
yeah, that's
it's
awesome.
true. It's so true. So it's really, we share about everything on this podcast. We don't want to close our subjects to, we only talk about this or that or that. We talk about everything and anything that, you know, brought someone from one place to the other. They're willing to be vulnerable in the in-between and share what really happened. And that it brought them success. And again, success has so many different definitions, you know, for anyone. For one, it can be being able to feed their kids one day. For another one, it can be winning the Nobel Prize. So success is very large. But I love our podcast. And honestly, every single interview we do, I finish and I'm like to them, I'm so emotional. And she's like, okay. But it's pretty cool.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So those are mainly, when you say lifepreneurs, I mean, it seems like everybody walking on the face of the planet is a lifepreneur in a way, if you're fulfilling your own purpose. And definitely entrepreneurs, people that have a purpose and have turned it into a business. I guess you would say, like, entrepreneurs solve people's problems for money, right? So, well, that's a business. However, the purpose hopefully becomes bigger than the business. In fact, that's how you grow your business, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So those are typically what type of those are the people that you typically interview?
Yeah, people that have a business, or for example, you know, we interviewed a woman and actually did a big fundraiser for a woman that was doing advocating for mental health for men, right? And the story about why it's important for men and what is it that they go through. And we had someone come on and share their story. A man who worked in the construction industry that just couldn't go to work and tell people how he was feeling because it was not freaking cool. And what saved his life was walking into an emergency room saying, I've got a gun against my head and I'm going to kill myself. And I think I need some help. And they got him some help. And it was just because he couldn't share what men go through. And so we interviewed him because that was such a powerful moment, such a powerful story. And he made great impact in being vulnerable. So it's usually people that are doing something that needs that exposure, you know, to bring it on the podcast, we know is going to change a lot of people's lives. And or they really want to get a message out, and there's something to that. There's something very globally attractive or very moves in a certain direction, or there's it's moving. It's a moving story. But yeah.
Nice, cool. Well, how can they find you guys? How can they subscribe to your podcast?
Oh, you can go to, well, all of our podcasts are on ctrnetwork.com
CTR.
network.com
Okay.
/true dat. So that will actually give you all of the channels, but we are on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon. So on all the podcast major channels, you can look for the True Dat Show and you will also find us. And we also have a YouTube channel because we're cool.
Yeah,
so we have a YouTube channel and we actually put all of our interviews to be able to watch them as well.
Cool, nice. Well, any final words you'd like to leave the audience with?
You know what? I think if I was to, you know, first of all, I want to leave an invitation that if you feel that you have something to say or share and you'd like to come on and be an interviewee, we'd absolutely love for you to reach out. If you feel like we're a fit for you, then let's do an interview and get your message out to the world. Gosh knows we're spread everywhere and there's other places you can find us. And the other thing I would just,
how would they contact you to be able to, if they have a great story, how would they contact you?
Deb and Caroline at gmail.com.
Caroline, Caroline.
Yes.
Yeah.
Deb's pretty easy. I think they can get that.
Deb and yeah, Deb and Caroline at gmail.com. They can also reach out to you and you can put them towards us if they don't remember that. The only other thing I think I would say, which is my philosophy around the podcast, is just be brave. Like, just be brave. Like, whatever that means to you, just be brave.
Nice. That's easy.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. And for me, what carried me my whole life. And then after I found out that Richard Branson actually stole this quote from me. No, I heard it from him and really it stuck. You know, whatever happens in life, just say yes and figure it out after. And that's what I always did. I took jobs I had no experience for. I did so many different things that I had no clue, and it all brought me to the next level. So say yes and figure it out after.
That's so awesome. Jump in with both feet. Cool. Well, I want to thank you both for taking time to share with our audience. And you guys, you know, your stories are amazing. Your emotional and spiritual contribution is great. I'm sure there were so many great principles, concepts, and just mindsets and just courage. I think that's the most inspirational thing, is just the courage it takes to go through, you know, the things and the epiphanies that you went through and come out on the other side and contribute to humanity is truly admirable. So thanks for taking your time, and love you guys, you More Powerful family. We all love you, and you guys have some great stories. So contact them and make sure you subscribe to True That podcast.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you.